From the moment you start Death Stranding, it tells you preparation is everything, that every journey is very dangerous, and that being careless could ruin everything. But the more you play the game, the more you realize that none of this is true. The danger is fake, the preparation is optional, and once you see that, it changes everything. This game is about survival, planning, and burden, but it quietly strips all of that away the moments you stop paying attention. Ever since Death Stranding came out, people kept asking me, what do you think of it? Because I'm a hardcore Hideo Kojima fan. And I never really had a simple answer, and not because it was too deep or too complex, but because it was confusing in all the wrong ways. So instead of another surface level take, I want to make this video. This is what I really think about Death Stranding. Not just how it looks or what the story tries to say, but what the game actually does when you play it. The systems, the mechanics, the design, because once you really break those apart, you notice something really obvious. What Death Stranding tells you and what Death Stranding actually is are two very different things.
Come and find me.
It promises weight, not in just a physical weight, but emotional, strategic, narrative weight. Every trailer, every mechanic, every slow moment showing mud caking your boots says, what you do here matters. Every step counts. It tells you this fantasy of preparation, that you need to think ahead, that the world is harsh, that your tools, your decisions, your caution, all of it will be the difference between survival and failure. But once you're actually playing it, once you stop listening to what the game says and just do the things that work, it becomes clear. None of this really matters. You can ignore preparation, you can walk straight through most dangers. You're often handed the gear you need the moment you need it, making your choices feel really irrelevant. And the threats the game warns you about, they rarely follow through. Some are scripted, others never happen at all. What looked like a kind of a survival open world game turns out mostly to be smoke and mirrors to me. And that's what this video is about. How Death Stranding is designed to feel like a difficult, meaningful experience while quietly pulling away anything that might actually make it one. Death Stranding is an absolute illusion. So let's break it down piece by piece, and I'll tell you what I mean by this. This is gonna be a long-ass video. I have no other way to explain this topic in a reasonable 10-minute video. Let's break it down. The world, the traversal, the gear, the enemies, the systems, the story, the characters, everything. Let's look how Death Stranding builds this illusion of depth, and how that illusion slowly starts to fall apart the deeper you go into the game. Even if you might not have realized this at first, you might eventually. Let me start right off by saying this. The beginning of Death Stranding is genuinely the best part of the game. You're confused, fascinated, and constantly uneasy about what's happening. The cutscenes are very strange. The metaphors are very unclear. The characters feel kind of alien. And meanwhile, the game asks you to quietly move forward through an unfamiliar, hostile landscape. Every single trip and delivery you do feels very much improvised at the beginning. You're working with whatever you can carry, whatever you think might help anyway, crafting whatever you can. And without flashing it in your face directly, the game is kind of teaching you something important. You know, respect the terrain, read the slopes where you can go, find your route, prep your gear, and try not to get too cocky. The first map is basically a very long tutorial, but it's also honestly a really good one. It doesn't really checklist you to do all these things or force you through each occasion. You kind of just learn it by trying. It trains you through friction. You kind of get the feel of the BTs a little bit. You kind of get through the mules a little bit. You learn how to carry stuff here and there. You go through the water and see what you can do. And that's why what comes next really matters, because if this game truly was about crossing land on foot, then the tools it gives you should really deepen that tension, but not quietly erase it. And early on, the game does exactly that. It really conditions you to see the world as a harsh and indifferent space, where every slope could throw you off balance, where planning matters, and where preparation feels really essential. It's immersive, even convincing for a while to you as the player. But then the systems start to unravel one by one. The game gives you tools that bypass its own core tension, and at worst, it rewards you for using them? It's really strange. The first major turning point is the trike. Once you unlock it, everything changes. You no longer have to plan and balance your cargo. You no longer have to think about paths. The terrain goes from being kind of your greatest challenge to just kind of a slight inconvenience with the rocks. It's not like you even need to load the cargo onto the trike properly. The moment Sam sits down, the physics practically disappear from your back. Your stacks become weightless. Balance completely stops mattering there. The slopes stop mattering. Now it's just about holding the accelerator and dodging the occasional bump here and there. The irony is that the trike makes Death Stranding feel more like a casual delivery sim than the early hours ever did. There's no meaningful counterbalance to using it either. You can still S-rank deliveries with it. There's no stamina drain, no terrain management, just pure speed. So of course you're going to use it, why wouldn't you? You can literally even do these goofy wheelies and just like have no inertia wiggling left to right with no consequence. It would have been more interesting if the game kind of forced you to be a little bit careful and not to decelerate and accelerate too fast and losing packages. That would have been more to the style of the game. But it gets worse. Eventually you unlock ziplines. And with enough PCCs, you can construct a literal highway in the sky that spans the entire mountains, the entire game, and every single section you need to go to be honest. It bypasses threats, ignores terrain, and completely removes the need to touch the ground. And while building all of this zipline network thing is pretty satisfying to do at first, the result of you doing this is you not playing the game at all anymore after you're done with it, which is insane to me. Once your zipline network is in place, traversal is practically over. You've solved the problem. Now you can accept a delivery, zipline to your destination, and zip right back in under a minute. It's clean, it's super efficient. Now the game is completely hollow. And here's the catch. None of these tools are optional in a design sense. They're presented as options, sure, right? But the gameplay actively nudges you to use them. You're encouraged to get higher rankings. You're rewarded for faster, smoother deliveries, no damage on it, right? And the systems that would actually challenge you, you know, the stamina bar, your balancing, BTs in the way, even the weather, are either completely trivialized or bypassed entirely through all the PCCs, all the tech that you can buy and use. This is what I mean when I say the game is full of contradictions. It wants you to feel the strain of crossing these journeys, right? To be immersed in the slow and deliberate process of traversal. But then it hands you these tools that completely skips that exact experience. Instead of leaning deeper into its core mechanics, Death Stranding sidesteps them completely. Don't get me wrong, some of these shortcuts feel really satisfying in the actual moment of the game. They feel kind of like fast travel systems in other games, like once you start using them a lot, you can't really go back. The pacing has completely broken from there on. You've officially made traversing this world frictionless, and in doing so, you're removing the soul of the game. Problem isn't that these mechanics exist, the problem is that they become the optimal way to play. And when optimal play removes every challenge possible, what's left in this game? Death Stranding also constantly tells you how dangerous the world is. It wants you to feel like every step is a risk, that your cargo could be lost, your life could be on the line, and the very landscape could betray you. BTs, timefall, mules, corpse explosions, these are all threats that are supposed to define the experience. But once again, the game overpromises and underdelivers. Now, let's talk about BTs first. They're introduced like something out of a horror movie, honestly. These invisible ghosts, almost like monsters, that can drag you underground and trigger a massive void out if you're not careful. The early hours condition you as the player to really fear them, to crouch slowly through the rain-soaked forest, right? Hold your breath, scan the terrain with BB's radar, like you're playing Alien Isolation or something. In the beginning it's cool, but that feeling doesn't really last. Eventually you realize that the BTs aren't dangerous at all, to be honest. Not really. If you get caught, the punishment isn't death, at least most of the time. You know, unless you get dragged by the golden BTs, you'll sometimes notice in certain areas. Yeah, that's an instant failure rate. That's not even like a proper fight. But usually they drag you and then you do a boss fight where the game conveniently spawns all these weapons you need right next to you after like a minute or something. Even if you're carrying nothing, you can show up completely unprepared, get grabbed, and the game will just hand you grenades and guns out of thin air. And then once you win, you're rewarded with a shit ton of the crystals from the boss. So that's how you pretty much start farming them in the first place. You never have this problem anymore. You can pretty much never craft ever anything again because once you do the boss fight and it ends, all this gear is just laying around everywhere. You can just collect them. And once you do win, you're rewarded with also the BTs vanishing from the area. If you don't go to bed, it'll just stay like that. Unless you're in some of the really late game areas, then they respawn after like a couple of minutes. So the actual punishment for messing up the stealth, well, the punishment is it gives me resources. It makes it easier to progress through. I get more gear, easier path forward in general. Now there's no rain, so it doesn't damage my gear. What was the point of this? Why would I ever sneak through? What the fuck? Let that sink in. The danger isn't neutralized, it's incentivized. The same goes for the bodies. Remember the corpse disposal mechanic? You know how you had to like send your mom pretty much to get cremated? You know, the idea of that if someone dies and you don't cremate their body in time, they'll turn into a BT and possibly trigger a void out. That was just purely narrative fluff. Outside of a few scripted missions and one of the side quests that just happen randomly where it says, oh shit, there's a body, go grab it. Nothing really happens. You can haul corpses across the map for weeks in game. You can sleep next to them, stack them like firewood. Nothing happens. So you might be thinking right now, what, Faizyr Sam is just some kind of psychopathic killer that's gonna haul corpses around the United States? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Friend is a friend to the end of the end, that's forever. Stay by your side, don't hear me say goodbye, come with me. 'Cause that's what friends do. That's what friends do. 'Cause that's what friends do. That's what friends do. 'Cause that's what friends do. That's what friends do. 'Cause that's what friends do. Let's just sit here for a second.
What the fuck was that? Anyway, the thread is an empty one. It only really happens when the story demands it. And even if it does happen with like the side quest that I said, the only thing that really happens is that you get a game over screen instead of anything really happening in the world, which would have been way more interesting. I purposely left a body that I was asked to recover from one of the, you know, random world events, that quests that happen, or whatever you would call it, random encounters, right? I left it for days on the ground, and then all of a sudden, boom, game over screen. Norman Reedus be talking like, oh shit, did I leave a body? And then it forces me to restart. I restarted the game, only to find out that body that exploded in my previous fail state is gone. I don't even have to go recover the body. So not only does nothing happen in the actual world other than me getting a fail state, but after it happens and I reload the game, well, the body is gone. I don't even have to deal with it anymore. So what was the point of all of this? This was a slight inconvenience for me because I had a saved game like 30 seconds ago. So who cares? I don't have to go multiple saves backwards and go save the body. No, I can just move on and continue what I was doing. Then there's failure itself. Losing cargo, missing deadlines, damaging packages. It should hurt, but it really doesn't. The deliver rating system is so forgiving that unless you're actively trying to fail, you'll almost always land on the highest ranks. Even when you don't, the game shrugs it off. There's no meaningful penalty, no major resource loss, no gameplay consequences beyond a number that slightly dips on a screen that you barely need to look at anyway. Dude, what happens if I Tony Hawk into her? The like system is kind of pointless too. It legit doesn't really do anything. So murdering a bunch of people everywhere you go doesn't even matter. It's like, oh yeah, I lost 10,000 likes by murdering people. But why do I care? It doesn't affect me in any way. It's literally a fake value. Like, it doesn't matter. Sure, BB will be offline, but again, if it doesn't matter if you get caught by BTs and you'll fight them anyway to just clear out the whole area, why do you even need BB in the first place? Let's not forget the combat encounters. Mules are the human enemy faction, right? They're meant to be the serious threat, but they're cartoonishly bad at their job. You can run past them, you can tase them, you can even knock out an entire camp with a single bola gun. And the game claims that they're dangerous addicts obsessed with stealing your cargo. But even when they succeed, their camps are clearly marked and you can retrieve your lost gear without any issues. You're supposed to feel like you're surviving in a ruined world from what the game is trying to sell to you. But in reality, you're being babysat. This really isn't a harsh apocalypse. It's an amusement park ride that splashes water in your face like, here you go, look at this. Even death, the supposed ultimate consequence, is kind of meaningless. Sam can repatriate. He can't die in in the traditional sense. The worst case scenario is being pulled into a fight, floating around for a bit, and then respawning a few feet away. The game literally won't let you fail. And again, I get it. This was probably to prevent players from getting stuck. But if every thread has training wheels on it, if every punishment is just a disguised reward, then where's the actual tension? Please show it to me. What Death Stranding offers is a performance of danger. It gives you the aesthetic of tension, of like the storm, the clouds, the eerie music, the scanners flickering, BB crying, you know, it's getting really tense, but it's not of the substance. It's a haunted house, not a real threat. You're not surviving a journey, you're playing out the fantasy of one. And that's what really bothers me about this game. Because when a game pretends to be about survival, about danger, about isolation, and caution, right? It can't also guarantee that nothing will go wrong. That contradiction creates a disconnect, and the more you notice it, the less immersive everything becomes. The game wants to be so meaningful. It wants to say something about connection and effort and endurance. But when the systems don't support those ideas, where the story, lore, and gameplay don't all intertwine correctly with each other, everything feels hollow. The result is a game that pretends that it's hard, while secretly making sure you're always safe. And once you see through that illusion, it's hard to take anything seriously in this game. And this comes from someone that's played this game 3 times already, hoping that maybe I'll enjoy it more. But usually the opposite happens. Games are usually built around the idea of progression of some sort. As you move forward, things get harder, you unlock better tools to face tougher challenges. That's the loop, usually, in most games. Earn, upgrade, overcome. But in Death Stranding, that loop is super broken. The deeper you go, the less effort you have to put in, the challenges fade, and all the mechanics that seem vital early become completely irrelevant. You can pretty much erase them walking mechanics at all times. In the beginning, every step feels deliberate. You're choosing your loadout carefully, you're getting immersed into the game, calculating the weight versus stamina. Oh, how much stamina do I have? Oh crap, do I have backup shoes? I need those shoes. Oh man, maybe I should get like 4 ladders because I'm worried, you know, maybe I'll need it right now. Hoping that you don't misstep in any way. The struggle is part of the experience there. Climbing a cliff actually feels like a feat. But once you've unlocked the vehicles, the power skeletons, the zip lines, the launchers, and you built out your chiral network, something funny happens. The world now feels smaller, and it didn't get easier through your skill of the game, but because you don't need to play the game anymore. You start ignoring the ladders, you stop fabricating climbing anchors. Even the terrain stops mattering because now you can just float above it, drive over it, or automate around it. The zip lines trivialize mountain crossings, highways let you just ride straight through BT zones, and any tension from movement or cargo management evaporates. And that's the part that absolutely destroys my interest in this game. The game rewards you for doing less. Why would I hike up a jagged hill balancing 80 kilos of ceramics when you can just zip across the entire region in 30 seconds and still get an S rank? Even Sam's gear starts to feel like an illusion. Like the stupid oxygen mask that pissed me off so much in the game. The game introduces it like it's essential at the really late part of the game. Something seems ominous, important, but in reality it's literally used once, maybe twice in one of the other areas at best. Most of the time it's just another kilogram of dead weight in your pack. It honestly feels like they completely forgot they even made this item. The same goes for half of the other equipment. Oh, hematic grenades? You barely use them after you realize BTs aren't dangerous. Bola gun? Kind of optional unless you want to kill the mules, I suppose. You're just gonna get the assault rifle anyway. You're gonna get the proper guns to murder people anyway later on, so who cares? Bridges, watchtowers, the launchers, all that stuff. It's nice, but ultimately unnecessary. There's no penalty for not engaging with most of these systems, so most players will stop bothering because the game itself doesn't push them to really care or give a shit. Even the menu systems, which start off as intimidating a little bit, something that you'll kind of like have to play around and mess with it to succeed, eventually it becomes a very empty ritual. You just mash the optimize button, you'll auto-equip everything, you'll just skip fabricating screens because most of the items don't really matter anymore. The game becomes this muscle memory. Oh, accept delivery, press confirm, run zipline route, get likes. All of these things slowly just kind of whittles down and erodes this game. Death Stranding starts with so much friction, rough terrain, poor equipment, fear of BTs, uncertainty around preparation and going in any corner of the world. But but every hour you play, it sands that friction down to the bone. And by the end, you're pretty much gliding through the game without any worries of the world, because the game has removed every obstacle in your path. This is what makes Death Stranding's progression feel so hollow in the first place. You don't get better at the game just stops resisting you. For a title that's supposed to be about endurance, about persistence, about carving a path through adversity, that's a pretty fundamental contradiction. So the question becomes, why even give the player so many tools if the best strategy is to ignore most of them? Why pretend this is a survival experience when you're rewarded for skipping the survival part? Instead of rewarding creative problem solving, the game rewards automation instead of raising the stakes. It softens them for you. The tension dies, man. And with it, the very thing that made the early hours so compelling dies. It's upsetting, man. And then there's Lou, BB, right? Who's with you through all of this. The one part of the game that genuinely feels alive. We'll come back to her, because what the game does with her in the final act, it's one of the biggest betrayals of the game. Now, if Death Stranding had a single defining theme, it is connection, right? It's baked into the story, the world, even the marketing. You're told repeatedly that this game is about rebuilding America, not through violence or conquest, but by reconnecting people, right? You're not a soldier, you're a porter, a bridge between isolated settlements, and the most original part of the concept is the game's online system, a world where players help each other without ever meeting. On paper, this is a brilliant idea. It slightly makes me think of From Software's idea of like Dark Souls and stuff, where you see markings and stuff like that. Very similar kind of idea. You can leave structures behind, ladders, bridges, generators, zip lines, and other players can use them. You can contribute to building the highways, drop supplies in post boxes, or leave signs to warn others about hazards and stuff. So now you're not just only surviving, but you're contributing to this experience for everyone. And now that's the fantasy though, but the reality doesn't quite deliver. Let's start with this illusion of multiplayer. And yes, it's most likely an illusion. Despite what the game wants you to believe, you're not truly sharing the world with others. Every player exists in a separate instance. The world is fragmented. You're seeing a curated subset of structures chosen by the game's algorithms. Or maybe just randomly pick something. Not by proximity or real-time interaction. You don't know who left that ladder, when they placed it, or if it came from another player at all that was playing at the same time as you. It could have been someone from years ago and the game just collected this data to use it somewhere else. This creates this strange disconnect. You're told you're part of this community, but you never actually see that community. Yeah, you see the usernames or whatever, but when was the last time they played? You can take down multiple structures and then after some time, some other propagates. So it really doesn't matter. You can destroy it, but that gets destroyed only in your world. So who cares? There's no real-time acknowledgement. You're surrounded by signs of life, but no actual people. It's like wandering through a graveyard full of helpful ghosts. Even the like system, which is supposed to represent appreciation and goodwill, feels more like a gimmick. You can mash the like button on a zipline like hundreds of times, and you can earn thousands of likes for a structure that might have never even helped anyone, to be honest. How could you really confirm that someone did it? There's no real feedback loop. It's just blind gratitude without ever knowing if you actually helped anyone. Worse is the game never makes it clear how your actions affect others. Did someone use your bridge? Is your postbox helping anyone? Did it vanish into server oblivion the moment you logged off? The system is opaque, vague, and asks you to feel connected without giving you the evidence that the connection exists. When the servers eventually shut down, I'm pretty sure they're going to use some predetermined data that will randomly spawn things like this anyway. This isn't a knock against asynchronous multiplayer as a concept that it's trying to do. Games like Dark Souls or Journey have proven how powerful this can be. But in those games, your impact is immediately visible. You see phantoms, you see bloodstains, you see the intent. In Death Stranding, you see a ladder and you hope it means something. It's gonna get destroyed in time anyway. Even the shared construction systems like roads and ziplines kind of feel strange. When you contribute resources to a road, it's unclear if anyone else is doing the same. Especially the roads, they often feel like your own project. Roads, out of all things, feel like they almost never get constructed without you placing them. Like the developers purposely did that, so you have to grind through it to unlock the roads in the first place. So like, why is that? Once the roads are built, so everyone just ends up using the same shortcuts, further reducing the need for interaction or creativity. All of this adds up to a multiplayer system that feels ironically disconnected. The irony. It's honestly a social system without socialization of any kind. It is a co-op system without any coordination. And when you pair that with the story's obsession with rebuilding society, it really starts to feel like the game is posturing, saying something deep without actually doing the work to make you feel it. There's a word for that: thematic dissonance. You're told this is about helping people, but you never see them. You're told your actions matter, but they don't ripple in any meaningful way. It's connection in the abstract. It's symbolic, metaphorical, and that might work in a movie, but in a video game, especially one about cooperation, it's hard to not notice how hollow this is. In fact, the more you play, the more it starts to feel like you're the only person there, that the world isn't full of others trying to help, but echoes of a system designed to simulate that idea. It's not a web of connections, it's a lonely server pretending to be one. Who's to say this random dude's recharger that I level up to level 3 actually did something to that dude? Who actually knows? And hey, maybe that's the point, I guess. Maybe Kojima meant to simulate the emptiness of social media, right? Where everyone's talking but no one's really listening. Where you like things to feel involved but you never actually connect. But even if that's true, it doesn't make the gameplay feel any better. Satire only works if the mechanics are still satisfying. In Death Stranding, the online system feels like a magic trick. Impressive at first and like so grandiose, but underwhelming once you see the strings, you see the puppeteering. In the end, it's not that the game fails to deliver on its themes, it's that the mechanics actively are betraying them over and over and over. You're meant to feel part of something bigger, but what you really feel is alone. You're alone. Holy fuck. And to stop feeling alone, I think we should make a connection and you should subscribe to the YouTube channel and get notified when more critiques come out into this channel. I make these videos purely out of passion. Now let's rewind a little bit. Death Stranding starts as a game about movement. It's a very deliberate, grounded experience built around navigating the world and managing risk. A sci-fi, creepy horror world, but still a grounded world to a degree. But by the time you're halfway through, something kind of shifts. Bit by bit, it stops being this game you play and it starts becoming this game you watch. A lot of the cutscenes get longer and longer, the frequency kind of increases. Conversations really stretch out for minutes without pause. The gameplay kind of fades into the background as you're dragged into these really big exposition dumps to really dramatic monologues. Each one kind of becomes more and more theatrical than the last one. And obviously this isn't really new for a Kojima game, but here it kind of feels really dissonant because it comes after very long stretches of gameplay beforehand, and then it whiplashes you with all this stuff. Now you're sitting through unskippable lore lectures about beaches, about Kaha, extinction entities that happened before. Holy shit, it's all over the place. I wish they sprinkled this throughout the game more. Kojima himself has said that games are like museums, spaces that guide you from one exhibit to the next. And Death Stranding is kind of exactly that. A curated experience where you don't participate so much as just observe. This is a game where you wake up in your private room, get Norman Reedus to act silly and wink at the camera, take a giant shit, then get a 5-minute cutscene about your dead mother's political agenda, all before you're allowed to move again. The story is really dense in pseudoscience, in metaphors, and metaphysical symbolism, and while some of it is genuinely thought-provoking for me, most of it feels like it's there to impress you rather than involve you into these topics and matters. The characters in the game speak in really cryptic monologues, exposition is delivered through static camera angles, and often the most pivotal scenes are locked behind complete passivity. You're not doing anything, you're again observing. But here's the bigger issue. None of this storytelling leverages the medium. And by medium, I mean video games. They're supposed to be interactive. You're not uncovering information through play. You're not interpreting themes through mechanics in-game. You're not making choices. You're just being told explicitly and at length what to think and why. That's not really interactive. That's just a film that occasionally asks you to hold forward on the stick to go somewhere. And this isn't a knock against narrative-heavy games. Games like Outer Wilds, Disco Elysium, or Return of the Obra Dinn. All of these games tell complex, layered stories, but the key difference is that in those games, your input shapes how the story is understood. You discover it, you investigate it, you assemble the meaning through play. But in Death Stranding, the story just kind of unfolds the same way regardless of your engagement in the game, in the universe, or the understanding of it. You can walk, fight, deliver, or rest. Do everything or do nothing, but you're still just kind of watching. You're a spectator with a controller in your lap. Even the emotional moments are really undermined by how little you actually do. The game forces you to carry a nuclear bomb that was just handed to you. Not really acknowledge that he's even carrying one as it's beeping. Beep, beep, it's fucking red on the screen until it's dramatically convenient slightly later on. It makes you walk to an incinerator with BB in your hands, but gives you no way to resist this, of placing it and set it on fire. No way to express what you feel. There's no alternate way to end this. The mechanics don't match the emotions. You're told to care, but you're not allowed to act upon it. This disconnect only grows larger as the game progresses. Long stretches of walking are now broken up by boss fights that feel completely divorced from the core gameplay. The stealth and the traversal mechanics kind of vanish. Suddenly, you're in a foggy World War I trench with assault rifles and grenades, then all of a sudden you're in a beach, then a movie-length monologue about extinction happens. The museum exhibits start clashing with one another until the entire structure of this game begins to feel unglued. Even your bond with BB, arguably probably the most personal thing in the game in terms of mechanics. Even this is moved to the quiet side of the game's interactions. Is during rest screens, you rock her in your arms, you hear her laugh, you see her react to the weather, but these are really isolated mechanics, not integrated systems. You don't rely on BB, you don't protect her in meaningful ways. She just becomes another icon on your HUD that flashes here and there when her stress gets high or is on alert or something. And then there's the fight with Higgs. The game suddenly tries to transform itself into something it hasn't earned, a grand opera-themed climax, as if we're reliving the legacy of Metal Gear Solid. Especially the stupid fist fight that happens with Higgs. Oh my god. It somehow forgets that it's just one game and you barely even interacted with this guy, but it's acting like it's some crazy 15-year adventure that the player has gone through, like Metal Gear. I'm sorry, but this fight has no meaning in comparison to this fight here in Metal Gear Solid 4. It plays out like it wants to be this iconic final battle between Snake and Liquid in MGS4, but in Metal Gear, that fight had emotional weight. It was a result of years of story, of loss, of legacy, of character development, of all these characters, betrayal. You felt the history with every punch in that fight and in that cutscene. In Death Stranding, it's just fucking Higgs, a guy who mostly showed up to yap about some bullshit and then teleport away. There's no real connection here. There's no true build-up to the fights. It's just a really forced attempt to be theatrical, to be epic. It feels really artificial to me. It's mimicking something far more earned. It doesn't deserve that, I'm sorry. And that exact fight encapsulates the problem. The game wants to be remembered like Kojima's previous masterpieces, but it skips the time and the work needed to even get there. The sad part here is that Kojima is so close to something great. The ideas here are really strong. The themes are there. The game wants to say something about human connection, about loss and labor, even grief, but it doesn't let you play any of it. It's content to tell you about those things in monologues all day long, but then it throws you back into a menu where you can equip your next pair of boots. This is the downside of this museum mindset that Kojima has and some developers have these days. When everything is just a display case, you're not really ever invited to touch it, you're just observing. And in a medium built around interactivity, video games are the perfect clash between story and interactivity. It's a fundamental contradiction to it all. Death Stranding wants you to feel the weight of the journey, but it never lets you steer the narrative in any way. It's set in stone, whether you like it or not. It wants to immerse you in this world, but it constantly breaks immersion to tell you how to feel. Hey, feel like this. It wants to be a game about connection, but it isolates you behind this glass because you're in a museum. Don't touch the pieces. You might even say, but the Metal Gear Solid games are like that. Yeah, sure, majority of them were to a degree, but you know what? It was split perfectly. It had a perfect balance, in my opinion, between heavy storytelling, but also incredibly unique gameplay where you can't get it anywhere else. That's so fucking cool. And not only are they unique, but they don't clash with one another. What you do in game and what happens in the story blend together. For all of this game's abstract ideas about connection, there's one relationship that actually really feels tangible. That's not just through exposition, but hours of shared gameplay and movement and taking care of one another. And if the game was ever going to let the player step out behind this museum glass, this was the moment. For all of its high concept themes and really surreal storytelling, one of the most grounded human elements in Death Stranding is your bond with Bibi. She's your companion for most of the game. She helps you spot danger, responds to your movements, laughs when you slide down hills, cries when you fall. She's not just a tool, right? She's a presence. She makes the world feel less empty. And the bond is earned, slowly and gently, through repeated interaction with the character. You learn to check on her, to soothe her, to care for her. She becomes part of your routine as you play the game, just like grabbing a fresh pair of boots or setting a new zip line. But unlike any piece of gear, Lou feels alive in the game, which makes this incinerator scene where Sam is ordered to cremate her feel like the emotional climax of the entire game, right? This is supposed to be the moment where everything you've been through with Lou pays off. This is the emotional high point, the moment where your bond is tested, but it's not at all. Because the game doesn't let you do anything. You're forced to walk to the incinerator, forced to place her in the platform, forced to watch Sam hesitate, and then begin to activate the machine. And even if that turns out to be fake, Sam hesitates, cancels, picks her up again. The twist is meant to be emotional. Sam can't go through with it and decides to save her. But here's the problem. You never had a say. You weren't allowed to resist. You weren't even allowed to express hesitation. You had to walk her there. You had to go through the motions of murder, only to be told in a cutscene, don't worry, Sam saved her. But you didn't, the player. You didn't save her. You were just along for the ride. And that's the fundamental failure of this scene. It undercuts the entire player-character relationship. Death Stranding spends dozens of hours building an emotional bond between you and Lou, not just Sam and Lou. And then at the most critical moment, it takes that control away from you. It tells you what you need to feel, what you believe, what you do. Imagine how powerful that moment could have been if the game trusted you, if you were given a real choice to, follow the orders, or to defy it, and to cremate Lou, or to try to save her. A choice where, these consequences were meaningful, not just pre-scripted, man. Even if the story ultimately needed Lou to survive, there are countless ways to give the player agency without rewriting the whole plot. Instead, the game pulls the rug right under you. And it did all of these things just for the dramatic effect and no actual narrative surprise. This blows, man. And in doing so, it severs the very connection it tried so hard to build. In the clearest example of the game's ongoing problem, disconnect between gameplay and storytelling. Lou isn't a story character who shows up for a few cutscenes. She's with you for the entire game. Well, most of the entire game. You know which one I'm talking about. She reacts to the world, to your actions. She grows alongside you. And then, in the final act, she's reduced to a prop in someone else's script. The incinerator scene is an abandonment of the game's mechanics, its themes, and its players. If Death Stranding is supposed to be about connection, then this was the moment to prove it. Prove it to us. To show that your bond matters. But instead, it shows that your role was never that important, that Sam's feelings are real, and yours are just along for the cutscene. And once that illusion breaks, it's hard to put it back together, man. If Death Stranding has a strength, it's ambition. Few games go as far out of their way to construct this really unique mythology. It's a world where death is no longer permanent, where the line between science and the supernatural is blurred into something really poetic. It's really eerie and existential. You have the extinction entities, you have the beach, you have the Ka and the Ha, the soul and the body split thing, Timefall, the seam, the void outs, the dead that refuse to pass on. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And at first, it's really captivating when you start playing it. The mystery really pulls you in. The idea that humanity is on the brink of another extinction event, not through war or anything like that, but through spiritual entropy of some kind. It's really conceptually rich. It's really compelling and strange. But over time, this feeling, this novelty kind of wears off. And it's not really because of the ideas stop being interesting or anything like that, but it's more like the game kind of fails to use all these topics and subjects meaningfully. What starts as really mysterious becomes really incoherent and doesn't make any sense. It piles you on top of concepts after concepts without really fully exploring any of them. The lore becomes really dense, but not truly deep. It's like a politician talking for 2 hours and not really saying anything. Sure, there were a lot of words used, but did they really mean anything? Take Amelie, the so-called extinction entity, as you realize at the end. What is she really? Is she like a cosmic force? Some sort of god? A metaphor of a god? A projection? Someone controlling her? Is it a woman with delusions of grandeur? You spend hours and hours and hours trying to reconnect America to Risher, only to discover that she both is and isn't real at the same time. That she wants to end humanity, but also wants to save it? And that she simultaneously is a puppet and the puppet master? None of this lands or sticks to me whatsoever. It's not like the ideas don't exactly work, but it's kind of because the game never gives you the clarity nor the weight or meaning that it needs. Amelie's motivations are abstract at best. Her goals shift depending on the cutscene. She's a character that you never really interact with any real way. She, shows up in holograms, especially at the beginning, with visions, and, when you pass out and all of a sudden you see her at your beach and stuff. These weird cryptic monologues, and it's kind of a mess. And then when she finally appears in person, it's really too late to care because not enough building was made on this character with you, and it kind of falls flat, man. This isn't really limited to Amelie either. This entire mythology in the game really suffers and hurts from this over-explanation without really any payoff to it. You get really long, drawn-out info dumps about how the beach works and how the BBs connect to the dead, kind of being living and dead at the same time, how Kanaha relates to soul fragmentation. But none of this really matters to your decisions. It's just kind of storytelling in a vacuum to a degree. You could replace half of these terms and subjects with absolute nonsense and other things, and the plot would kind of be the same thing. Even fascinating characters like Hartman and Deadman, whose lives are like directly affected by this whole thing going on, right? They feel like exposition bots at this point instead of anything else. Hartman flatlines every 21 minutes to visit the beach and search for his family. Deadman has no soul, and he's really terrified about what that means, what's gonna happen to him. These are really cool concepts, but the game doesn't really do anything with them. You don't really help Hartman find his family. There's no payoff in that. You don't help Deadman understand himself and, talk to him, get to understand what's going on. You just kind of listen to them talk, and then you move on and deliver another pizza. Kojima really wants this world to feel philosophical on life, like death, time, connection. But philosophy only hits hard when it has consequences, when you're made to wrestle with it through your actions. In Death Stranding, the ideas are pretty fascinating, but they're locked behind glass most of the time. Like I said, it's a museum piece. You're never really asked to challenge them in the game, or to believe in them, or even reject them. You're just kind of asked to sit and absorb the scene. The most frustrating part is how many of these ideas could have worked really fucking well. A world where the dead don't move on is honestly just right there for the picking for storytelling. A society that uses oxytocin pills instead of human contact says a lot about isolation. The idea of BTs, these literal manifestations of death, unresolved death, is really poetic, is really fantastical, but also sad. But the game doesn't really show these ideas, it just tells them to you, and then moves on to the next cryptic concept before the last one had any time to, really cook in your brain or to resonate. By the time you reach the actual ending of the game, it's hard really to know what any of this meant. Was the Death Stranding a metaphor? A mistake? A choice? A force of nature? What was Amelie trying to do? Was she trying to save the world? Or end it? Or to test humanity for their resolve? The game offers these multiple answers, and none of them really feel like they're the correct one, the definitive one, right? And not in the thought-provoking way, interpret it yourself kind of way, but in the we didn't really want to pick one kind of way. And when the foundation of your story is this unclear, it really weakens everything else, man. The stakes become really fuzzy and weird. The decisions feel really unearned. You're kind of left with watching these beautiful, acted, emotionally charged scenes with no understanding what any of it adds up to. And so, in the end, the game's mythology isn't bad because it's like super weird and like unique and strange. It's kind of bad because it's really incoherent. It really presents itself as a spiritual epic, like a story with rules and logic and consequences, not just to you, but other people. But there's no center holding it together. It's fragmented into pieces everywhere. It's these little tiny pieces and just names and just motives. And in a game about making connections, the most upsetting failure is that the story never connects its own ideas to the player and makes them experience it. One of Death Stranding's greatest tricks is really convincing you, the player, that the characters are really deep. And on paper they are, right? Hardman dies again, 21 minutes to visit the beach, find his family, and Dead Man was made of cadavers. He doesn't really have a soul. Mama is tethered to her dead baby by an umbilical cord, and it can't be cut. These are really strong setups. It's really thematically loaded. It's really eerie. But that's kind of all they are, though. They're setups. It gets really obvious that they're not real characters per se. They're all kind of ideas. They're built to explain the lore, but not really live in it. Now, let's start with Dead Man. He's effectively your personal tech support guy. He talks a lot, he yaps, he explains everything. He talks about and explains the BBs, helps you take care of stuff like that. Talks about the beach, the infrastructure of the UCA. But for a man with no soul, there's shockingly little introspection. There's not a single moment where he tries to connect beyond exposition. He just tells Sam about his existential fear, how he's not truly like a human being, right? But the game never really explores this mechanically or emotionally or in gameplay. He's literally a walking monologue. And sure, he's a great monologue, but it's still a monologue. Then there's Hartman. His gimmick is very interesting, as he dies on purpose all the time to hoping to find his lost family. He's got a built-in timer that pretty much knocks him out. That's a really compelling existential hook. It's a very Kojima-style mechanical metaphor for grief. But that grief is never really tested, and it's never really challenged. You don't go looking for them with him. You don't go to find his family. You don't really help him cope. You just kind of listen to him explain how sad he is, and then, again, you move on. And then later, out of all fucking things, at the end of the game, we get an interview from him saying that he gave up searching for them off-screen. In a fucking interview. Literally just random text. One of the main characters. Are you kidding me? Mama and Lochna, I don't know how to say her name. Lochna, I don't know, are another missed opportunity. Their twin bond is built around the idea of Kanha, right? The body and the soul split. It's a metaphor layered into their personalities and occupations. It's pretty clever. It's pretty interesting. Very symbolistic. Mama's tied to hardware. Lochna's tied to software. One loses her child, the other loses her trust. And when they get together, it's meant to reflect an emotional integration. But the moment lands really flat again, just like a lot of things, because it all happens in a cutscene with barely any groundwork through gameplay. You don't really earn their connection. You, again, are just a bystander watching it happen. Even Fragile, whose name is used as a punchline at a plot point. Hope you're strapped in, you got some popcorn. Get ready for this fucking line.
I'm fragile. But I'm not that fragile.
I may be fragile, but I'm not fragile. Like, what the fuck are you saying? It has this weird tonal imbalance. She's meant to be vulnerable, scared by Timefall, really traumatized by all the betrayal that's happened, but the performance is really stiff. The writing is trying to be really theatrical, but she doesn't talk like a person. She talks like someone trying to sound profound. which is such a shame because there's a version of her story about carrying shame, about sacrificing yourself for a doomed cause that could have really punched hard to the viewer and to the scenes, but instead it feels like another, another cool concept that was never really properly explored to then bring it back to life.
Honey, you ain't nothing but damaged goods.
You are damaged goods.
And then there's Amelie once more. I talked about her a little bit. She's a very frustrating character in the game, and if not the most frustrating. And it's not only because of her vague motivations or her confusing status as an extinction entity and all that, but it's because she's written entirely for a narrative function. She's not a person. She's not a plot device. She exists to trigger the ending, to deliver this exposition, to cry and whisper about humanity's fate in the most abstract way possible, and then using these disconnected terms in every direction possible. She doesn't really act, she doesn't interact, she just announces what's gonna happen. Kojima's writing is always tippy-toeing on this weird line between really deep and high concept and then a completely budget movie. In Death Stranding, that line is like really thin. Everyone and everything is a metaphor. Every name means something. Sam Porter Bridges is literally a man who builds bridges and connects America. Die Hardman is someone who, well, won't die. Dead Man, Fragile Mama. It's like reading a fucking nursery rhyme. And sometimes that campy, kind of cringe literalism kind of works in some cases, but other times it just feels like a parody of in itself. The game is being awfully serious in every other case, but then it's trying to be kind of casual and weird about its names and other stuff. It just doesn't make sense to me. Although the bigger issue isn't the naming, it's again the flatness of it all. You don't do anything with these characters. You don't challenge their beliefs. You don't share major events with them. You just listen. The closest anyone gets to a genuine emotional arc is Sam himself. And even he suffers from the same problem, which is the lack of agency as a player. Sam has aphophobia, if I said that right. He can't be touched. That's a really interesting premise for a game about human connection, but this fear is really rarely reflected in how he moves. In fact, I think it happens maybe twice in the game where the cutscene actually shows him being kind of like wonky with people. But usually he lets people get right into his face and stand right next to him and touch him. He shakes hands. He stands in elevators shoulder to shoulder with others. His supposed fear is now just a little visual tick mark and not an actual problem that he has, which is very emblematic of all the characters. They're all written with themes in mind, but not roles. They're all meant to say something about the world, but not do something in it. And because of that, they're kind of frozen in time, stuck in cutscenes, delivering lines about loss and identity and connection and pain without ever living in those things through the gameplay. Kojima wants to build characters that reflect his ideas, but the best characters in games embody those ideas through action. In Death Stranding, they just explain them over and over again. And when the monologues end, you're left alone again, carrying a package, wondering why none of them came with you? It just doesn't make any sense. For all of the game's systems, the symbols, and lore, The Stranding's at its best when it stops trying to impress you. It stops forcing that attitude. When it shuts the fuck up. When the music fades, when all the sounds fade, when there's no one in your ear explaining metaphysical nonsense about the soul, extinction entities. It's just you, a slope going down, some wind, and the simple act of moving forward. There's this amazing purity in those moments. Something really amazing about it. Walking alone, watching the sun cut through the fog, seeing the outline of a shelter at the horizon, right? After like 15 minutes of silence, no drama, there's no pressure, no cutscene waiting to hijack your controls, just the rhythm of traversal, hearing your breath, boots cuffing on the rocks, the little jitter-jatters of the packages moving around as you hold them, cargo gently swaying, a stumble here, slight correction here, Sam being a little bit tired. That's really when the game kind of feels alive. It's ironic because the most human moments in Death Stranding come not from its characters, but from its quiet moments. The long stretches of nothing, the patient, steady steps through the open space, the long stretches of nothingness. You aren't saving the world, you're delivering printer parts to some bunker-dwelling weirdo who hasn't seen the sunlight in a decade. And somehow that matters, because those stretches of silence when you play, it really gives the world more weight. They give your action a lot more significance. Even if the objective is very trivial and kind of stupid into a degree, it's not the destination, it's the distance. You really feel it. You earned it. And not really because there was a challenge or something, but because it left you alone long enough to really let you settle into it, like to really dive deep. It's meditative, almost cleansing. It's a Zen state. It's something really unique. It's like the quiet parts of exploring and moving forward in a game like Fallout New Vegas that I just remember. There's something very special about having a long stretch of silence. It lets you soak in what happened, either story-wise, lore, characters you talk to, or where you've progressed so far. Honestly, giving the player a moment to digest the game as they're playing is a lot more valuable than you might think. This is what makes Death Stranding special, and that's what makes it so frustrating, man, because just when you get into that rhythm, the game interrupts it with a cutscene, with a BT encounter, a million notifications that a BT fucker 420 used my ladder in bumfuck nowhere and liked it 4,000 times, where he most likely broke his controller spamming so many times in the first place, with some side character explaining beach metaphysics or some political structure in the UCA. The game doesn't really trust the quiet. It's always trying to fill this space. You're on the power grid. You're no longer power grid. Your battery's on power grid. You're no longer on power grid. By the way, did you know you're on power grid now? By the way, you're not on power grid anymore. Like, keep on getting on. Come on, like, keep on going on. Woo, have a pleasant journey. And yet the quiet spaces, honestly, is the experience. When you are out there, on foot, alone, Death Stranding feels like a game made by someone who understands what makes movement satisfying. It's the really subtle terrain shifts, the way your balance adjusts, this very slight panic when your stamina starts dipping really hard, even holding both triggers to steady yourself. As mindless and kind of lame gameplay-wise as it is, it still feels grounded in something tactile. It might not be very mechanically deep, but it has texture to it because as you're holding the triggers, Sam holds his backpack. That immediately gives you like a feedback, which is really nice and pleasant. But Kojima can't help himself instead these days. Instead of leaning into the quiet magic, the game layers on top and more of clutter, of menus, zip lines, trucks, floating carriers, power skeletons. All of these things are designed to remove friction. And in doing so, it removes feeling. Then of course come the boss fights, the combat sequences, the war flashbacks, the monologues about the afterlife and time ghosts and quantum wombs. None of this stuff enhances the walking. It just drags your attention away from it. It's almost like Kojima was afraid people would get bored of this game, and that a game about delivery, about slowness, about being methodical, about being present, that it wouldn't be enough. So he filled it with everything else possible that he could think of, as he didn't realize that the quiet moments were the most memorable ones. That feeling of climbing a ridge, cresting the peak, and seeing a structure in the distance, honestly, that's more satisfying than any boss fight in the game. That first moment of that music swells as you descend into the valley in the very first map, the relief you get of seeing a safe house after a long haul through the rain, that's the real story. It's not Amelie's extinction monologues, not Sam's confused parentage or anything, not Lou's fate, the BB. Death Stranding is a game that wanted to say something profound about life and death, but its most profound moments are unspoken. It's just you, the terrain, and the silence between the steps. That's it. That's absolutely it. And honestly, in the end, it didn't really need all of these systems, or the exposition, or the convoluted lore. What it needed was restraint, to actually trust in the player, trust in the nothingness. Because when Kojima lets go and the game actually stops fucking talking to you, Death Stranding becomes something rare. Not a delivery simulator, not a metaphor for society. It's just a walk through a broken world that still has beauty in it. And that on its own would have been enough for, I think, the majority of people. Death Stranding is a game full of ideas, really big ones. It really wants to explore death and isolation and purpose and human connection. It really wants to be about rebuilding, about healing, about endurance, and maybe most importantly, it wants to mean something. And yet, for all its ambition, Death Stranding doesn't trust its own premise. Because if it did, if it truly believed that carrying a package through a broken world could be powerful, it wouldn't try to distract you with combat. It wouldn't trivialize traversal with vehicles and ziplines. It wouldn't fake tension with scripted BT fights, or offer illusionary systems that punish nothing and reward everything. It wouldn't give you a dozen tools to make none of them matter. It would be hard. It would be really hard. It would be a tense game where a fuck up could potentially ruin your entire save. That would be crazy, but also cool. Not hard in the traditional sense, right? But not punishing or cruel, but hard in a way that gives weight to every step. Hard in the way that climbing a mountain is hard, right? Or climbing something that lasts is hard. It would ask more of you, and in return, it would give something real back to you, the player. Because here's the truth. Death Stranding didn't need to add more systems. It actually needed to do less, but make each part matter more. Imagine a world where you actually had to plan, where forgetting a ladder meant backtracking for an hour, where the wrong choice of boots could ruin an entire delivery, where BT encounters didn't hand you weapons, but forced you to choose between stealth, sacrifice, or retreating completely, not even bothering. Where every structure you built wasn't just a blip in someone else's instance at some point in years, but a commitment, something shared, permanent, essential. Imagine if body disposal actually really mattered, if losing cargo really hurt you, if the map didn't always give you an easy slope off to the side, but dared you to make a difficult path because the reward at the end would be worth it. And imagine if the game gave you agency when it counted. To say no, to keep Lou, to turn back, to act on this thing that you didn't want. If it had done all of this, if it had leaned into friction, into danger, into slowness, it would have alienated some players. Absolutely, it would alienate the fuck out of a bunch of people. It would have been super divisive, but it would have also been unforgettable in the best possible way. Instead of a walking sim layered in convenience and cutscenes, it would have been the most honest survival game ever made. To me, the biggest value a video game can do is do something unique and different and daring. Kinda what Demon's Souls did and still is today. It's a pioneer of a subgenre. It dared to do things different, something the sequels even were too scared to do. All these unique and different mechanics put into this game, and they try to make it work. Of course, there were bad things and good things from this kind of experimentation, but what's appreciated is that it is something different in the first place. Success or failure, at least it was innovative, and that drives the industry forward, which is really important. Kojima built a game about perseverance, about connection, and then made it easy to give up and feel nothing. He built a world where you're meant to earn progress, right? And then handed you highways and holograms. He asked what it means to live in the shadow of death, and then made death irrelevant. It's a contradiction that permeates every layer in the game, from its story to its systems to its emotional beats. And to me, it's such a shame, because all of the pieces were there, all the ingredients, but instead of being forged into something sharp, Death Stranding is really dulled down by its own fear of being misunderstood, of being actually genuinely something different. And again, it's not a failure, it's not a disaster. In some moments, it's even beautiful, but it stops really short, it backs down, it chooses safety over honesty, which is such a shame. And for a game taking the hard road in all of this, that's the biggest disappointment of it all. And that's why I never felt comfortable giving Death Stranding a seal of approval like so many others have. Because when a game pretends to be something more and unique, it deserves to be held to that standard.
The next explosion.